Good morning once again, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today we have kind of like Jessy, I want to say she's part of Food Access LA, directly or indirectly, but we work a lot with her. She's amazing. She's gonna be teaching us a little bit about good design and why it is good business. I'm glad to hear also that Jody has a background in graphic design and label design. So I feel like this will be it could be a really interactive webinar just to hear kind of like the discussion of it. Jesse, I'm gonna pass it on to you just so you can give a little bit more background. I'll be checking the chat as well, just in case anyone has any questions in the meantime. And then if you see I raise my hand, that's what it means.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for the intro. I'm super excited to chat with you all, share a little bit about design and branding and all that fun stuff. There is a little activity towards the end. So if you do have a Canva account, I highly recommend logging in. And if you don't, you have a good 45 minutes to an hour to quickly make one. Canva is free. There are paid tiers, but for what we'll be doing today, just the free tiers more than enough. Um, so yeah, as you're sharing in the chat, I'll just hop over to the next slide. I just want to honor that I'm on the unceded lands of the waters of the Tongva, the Chumash, the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, and the Gabrielino Band of San Gabriel Mission Indians. I'm based in the San Fernando Valley. I also want to honor the Paiute Shoshone tribe whose water we receive daily. So if you want to know whose lands you're on, there's a lovely website there called native-land.ca. So definitely feel free to check it out. So that's my face again. It's like dual face. My name is Jessy. My pronouns are they, she, ye. So I do UX, visual, and print design, and I'm the lead strategist behind Rara Matter, which is my independent business and design studio. And what I like to focus on is like balancing simplicity with experimentation, prioritizing sustainability because climate change, y'all. Trying to be and always growing towards a trauma and accessibility informed practice and moving towards equity for all in design. So yeah, I have been working with Food Access LA and Season Accelerator for the last several years. It's been such a joy. I really love supporting the work that they do and their mission. And I'm excited to share a little bit about how to utilize like design and branding within your own businesses here. So some goals that I have outlined here today is like understanding branding, visual language, brand design tips, and then training and empowering you all to design in Canva. So I just want to take a quick pause. How many of you have already used Canva? Are you familiar? Or even familiar with like just general like design do's and don'ts, best practices type of stuff? Okay, one hand, two. Okay, three. Okay, cool. Awesome. So some of the stuff that I'll be going over today might seem familiar. And if there's things that, really resonate with you or things that you want to add to the conversation, please feel free to do so. I definitely want to open this up and have it be more of like a shared conversation space. Folks are saying, okay, I use Canva, use Illustrator. Oh, Illustrator, awesome. Okay. I struggle but use Canva. Totally understood, no worries. Like what I tell folks is we live in a really fascinating time where we're having to learn a new tool on average every 3 to 4 months. So don't worry, I'm here to support. And no expectations today to like suddenly like get it all. Like it's always a process. Um, Cool. So here is our agenda. So what we'll be doing is focusing on branding, then understanding Canva and design tips. Then we'll do like a kind of like a quick check-in because I'll go through a lot of info. And again, feel free to kind of like raise your hand as we're moving through this. But I just wanted to, like, I always like to have like some time to just like pause and make sure, are the questions, what have you. Then we'll go into some design time. So that's when we'll hop into Canva. And then we'll come back for some sharebacks and final questions. And then our last slides are like closing and resources. You will have a copy of the presentation that I'm making today or that I'm presenting today. So don't worry about having to like screenshot and write a bunch of stuff down. This will be emailed out to you. So feel free to take notes that are maybe more specific to your thought process or what have you. Cool. So let's go into it. I created everything in Canva, including our logo. Okay, cool. Awesome. So let's go into what is design. At its most basic form, design is the art of communicating an idea through visuals and text. That's what it essentially boils down into. Anything beyond that is just like icing on the cake, but really what we're doing is we're communicating. And so part of the focus of like creating strong design is like learning who we're communicating to, who we're communicating with, what we're communicating, how do we want to sound when we communicate it, things like that. So some other things that I like to point out around design is design is a localized language that can have universal reach. And the reason I like to point this out is because especially in our current time with like iPhones and whatnot, there's this idea of universal design, but that's actually very specific to the context in which we're in. So for example, how we read in like Western societies, we read left to right and then top to bottom. In other cultures, they read right to left, you know, in different columns. So similarly, here in the United States, red tends to signify like emergency or like love versus, you know, a red dress in like Eastern cultures could signify like a love and like a wedding dress. Like we wear white out here for like a wedding dress, things like that. And so when it comes to like thinking about design and how you approach design, especially when you're working with like, you know, if you're developing your brand or if you're just being strategic on how you use the colors in your brand, you always want to think about what are the visual cues and the cultural and regional relationships between those cues, and how are you dialing into those to again best communicate with your audience. Like what culture is your audience from? What relationships do they have to the colors that you're presenting? What are the like, you know, what do those colors mean to them, so on and so forth. So when you're practicing design, what I love to do is always challenge your assumptions to make sure that you can be as accessible to as many people as possible, especially the audience that you're focusing in on. So yeah. The last thing that I like to point out here around design is that it's subjective. This is my favorite part because we've all experienced this. What looks great to you may look absolutely terrible to me, and that's perfectly okay because we are different people. We are unique in our perspectives, in our tastes. That's why you wear the clothes that you wear, and I wear the clothes that I wear, why your home looks the way that it does, and mine looks the way that mine does. However, with that said, there are certain rules and systems within design that do help you clearly deliver the message intended to your audience. So even though we have stylistic preferences, like color preferences, what have you, there is like kind of like a rhyme and a reason that exists to just to help, yeah, like communicate the message. And we'll be diving into that in a little bit. So, what is branding? Branding is the process of creating a distinct identity for a business in the mind of your target audience and consumers or customers or clients or however you phrase that relationship. So what the way that I like to like position it is if you think of yourself as like a person, you have, you know, a way that you sound, a way that you laugh, certain opinions that you have, certain things that you're passionate about, the way in which you communicate with the people that you love or your friends or whomever, right? That is your identity, that it like your values, what you stand for, you know, what you feel strongly about, what have you. Your brand for your business is the exact same thing, but just external from you. It's the business version of that. And so the way that your brand is created is one, you develop that back end yourself, right? Like you define what are the values, what's the mission, et cetera, of the work that I'm doing. But then it's further reinforced by the community that you present it to. So at the most basic level, branding is made up of a company's logo, your visual design. So that includes like your colors, like your logo, as I mentioned before, your typography, things like that, your mission and your tone of voice. All of these come together to become an identity, a recognizable being, if you will. And so the other thing, and the part that I was just speaking of, is that it's also determined by the quality of your products, or your services, whatever it is that you're offering. Excuse me. Customer service, how you engage with your audiences and how consistent you are in that process, whether you're consistently in a certain tone of voice or consistently with a certain way of resolving concerns, et cetera, what have you, but also your social media presence and even how you price your products or services. So what your customers think and say about your brand is the reality of your brand. It's not what you want them to think, which I know is like a huge trip up because you're like, oh, I spent all this work refining my coffee and my colors and all of this stuff. But ultimately, it's the relationships that you build with your community and how you reinforce that over time. Excuse me. So, like, if you think of any, like, I want you to just like kind of like have a moment to like think about one brand that you really love and one brand that you cannot stand. And just, and like, you don't have to say this out loud if you don't want or whatever, but just like think of like why. And very likely it's not going to be about how they look. It might be, but like on average, it's not. It's often about the relationship or the experience that you had with that brand. Maybe they let you down, maybe they had a price hike, maybe their customer service was just awful, maybe who knows, you got food poisoning, whatever, right? That is what stays with you, and that's what then carries on with you when you speak about that brand, when you engage with others around it, etc. So now to put it on the flip side, you as the person behind this brand, you want to cultivate a great relationship. You want to cultivate a great communication strategy, a great visual strategy to further build upon those relationships. So a strong brand will separate your business from everyone else. And it also affects how the audiences perceive the value of your product or services. And so I want to take a moment of pause here because there's a lot of language, especially in branding, around like competitors, competitor market, competitions, things like that. I tell people all the time I'm not a competitive person. It's just like the moment I feel that energy, I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I like walk the other way. And I bring that into my branding where I don't think of you like your brand and someone else's brand as competitors. I think of them as people you're in community with in the same way that you are in real life. And so you don't, I imagine, or I hope you don't compete with your friends. And similarly, I don't encourage folks as businesses to compete with other businesses. Instead, it's about forming community relationships. But again, and like similar to how you are in your identity, how are you different from your other community members? And what does that difference allow, or like where in that difference are you allowed to like shine or just show that uniqueness? And so a strong brand lets you step into that, while also again like fostering community. So some core branding elements are broken out here. So you have what we call like a logo family. So you have primary and secondary logos. And the reason those exist is because of use cases. So like a primary logo, like if you think of like Coca-Cola, like we all know that logo, that's their primary logo. Like you'll just see it anywhere and everywhere they could possibly use that logo. A secondary logo is something that would be specific to like maybe if you're doing a brand partnership with another brand, or if you have limited real estate space and you have to do a stacked version, or maybe you just like pull out one of the elements, etc. So secondary is sort of like a special edition type of logo, if you will. A word mark is something that you need legally. And for those of you, or all of you actually, since you are developing food businesses or food and drink businesses, you will be required to file a word mark with your trademark applications. And then icons are actually just like for social media, like profile pics, you know, letterheads, things like that, where you just need like a fun little version of your logo just to kind of have a recognizable element. Then we move into the visual design. And so this is kind of like normally when folks think of branding, this is what they think about. So they think of like the creative direction, like what is the story that the visuals are telling? What is the color palette and the usage rules? And by usage rules, I mean like which colors can play together, which colors cannot from your branding palette, uh, your typography, your photography style, and then the graphics that are a part of your brand. Then we go into personality. So this is kind of like where the identity part starts to really shine. So what is the voice? What is the tone? What is the persona? And what is the positioning of your brand? So the voice is like, it's how you sound, right? It's like how your copy sounds. The tone is a part of that. Like, are you an excited tone? Are you a more like reserved tone? Is it more about having a professional, or is it more playful or whatever? Like that is something that is specific to the brand that you're developing. And what I love to tell folks, it's like, it's always about consistency. Once you determine what these elements are, staying consistent with them will change everything. It'll set the foundation for the work that you're doing. Similarly, the persona is how you're interpreted and perceived by your community, and the positioning is how your personality is then in relationship with your audiences. Um, excuse me. My frog voice decided to just kick in. Okay, so then we go into purpose and strategy. So that's like your mission, your values, your services, your products, your business plan. This is like what you're doing. And again, it's important to dial into all of these different parts because that's what makes you unique within your community. And then lastly, we have community and messaging. So that's like your slogan slash your pitch, your target audience, your value proposition, and your social media presence, or like just general social presence. So when all of these come together, that's what creates the story of who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're doing it for or with, and etc. So I know it's a lot of different pieces. And there's lots of great resources that I've included, but that can also show up online that dive deeper into all of these elements. So what I wanted to quickly show you is a couple of projects that I've worked on where you see some of these elements start to show up. So this is Orgullo Ajeno Tequila that I did the branding and website for, as well as packaging. And so they're a queer-owned, Mexican-owned, immigrant-owned tequila company that's actually launching in a couple months, which is really exciting. And so what you can start to see here is like how these different branding elements start to come together. You have the logo, you have the fonts, you have like the general palette, like sort of these like interesting stylistic treatments, like the bio right below. And that is like, I like to show landing pages because I feel like that's the way that you can see how all these elements like work together to tell a story. Here's another project that I'm working on right now, actually called Black Women Are the Illuminati, which is a podcast centering like Black like visionaries across time, like focusing on their histories and their stories and futures and etc. And so again, you can start to see how these elements come together with the logo, the typeface, the like the unique treatments, etc. And that is specific to the feel, the way in which they want to position themselves as a podcast that's unique to other folks. Similarly here, this is City Kitchen. They're based here in LA, but they have locations nationwide. And so here you have another option of like, this is a much more refined, like pulled back, like very like corporate leaning, like catering service. And you can see that, or I would hope you can see that by looking at something like this, where it's like, okay, this is what we're selling. This is, contact us. Like it's speaking to a very specific audience. Another one here is ORS. They're an organization that does like DEI and social justice work. And you can see here, just by looking at it, you can kind of get like a sense of like, okay, what is the tone? What is the way in which they use their colors and their graphics? And how does that make me feel about the work that they're doing and how I expect to interact with them? And then lastly here, this is actually a Squarespace website template that I'm developing, but this is like another experiment in sort of like, how do you, again, see all these elements coming together? Like you have, this is like a Mexican, like themed, like brand concept. And so you have like this, like, like script writing that like can speak to like a slightly more like market menu, like more of like a handcrafted approach with like these other fonts right below. And so again, just like seeing how these stories come together and how you can make them successful is really, really important. So let's go into like brand guidelines. Someone asked, I do, yes. Sorry, the question was, do you make most of your work in Squarespace? And the answer was, I do. So in going into brand guidelines, I know that or not that I know, but in my experience when I was in school, the moment I was presented with like rules, I was like, oh no, I don't like them. They're no fun. They're boring. Unfortunately, brand guidelines are rules that we should keep. They're really, really important. Um, and the way that I like to think of them is more so as like a framework. It's kind of like an architecture system. Like you need the beams, you need the floor pan, you need the concrete just to make sure the house is still standing. So brand guidelines provide a framework to communicate your brand's identity, its assets, and what it stands for. Assets is like our word for just saying all the little elements that are a part of your brand, like the graphics, the visuals, the photography, etc. So the brand style guide puts rules in place, not to limit your creativity, because that's not what we want to do, but because we want to be consistent and recognizable. That's what makes, again, I'm not like a fan of Coca-Cola, but I like to use them as an example because we all just know it at this point. It's consistent, it's recognizable, it's been the same like since the beginning of their time, more or less. Like I can name a bunch of other brands that have achieved the same type of effect, even with their logo redesigns, like Pepsi would be another example, Nike would be another example, Adidas, etc. So that's something that like when you're thinking of like your own brand, like you want to center consistency, recognizability the entire way through. So once you ensure your brand guidelines are in place, you can ensure that your elements are used effectively and that they look aligned with your mission anytime that they're used. When the elements in your brand are used in the correct way, aka consistently and according to your brand guidelines that you developed, that's when you can create a powerful and identifiable brand. That's when you become recognizable and your community knows you. And community that you're trying to reach can easily connect with you. So what I like to tell folks who are kind of like in the beginning or just starting to implement their brand guidelines, because it can be kind of confusing, is like when in doubt, always go back to your brand origins. Always go back to your mood boards, your website, your social media posts. Like, what is it that you started with? Why did you start there? And then use that as a way to build patterns, the visual direction, and then the system that you'll be implementing moving forward. So I wanted to show you an example of the brand guidelines. This is the Orgullo Ajeno, the tequila company. So this is just some of their pages, it's not all of them, but just to kind of show you what the core elements are. So typically what you'll see in brand guidelines, and this varies per designer that you might be working with, or if you're developing by this, if you're developing this on your own, but more or less you'll see like a mood board. And the purpose of the mood board is just to kind of show like the visual like atmosphere that your brand lives in. So typically it includes like some photography, some graphics, some like other designs that feel like they're in relationship to your brand. And the reason it's helpful to always keep a mood board of your brand origin is because like when you're onboarding new folks, like maybe a copywriter or a graphic designer or a social media intern or a social media hired person or what have you, you can always show them this as like, this is the culture, the world that our brand lives in. Then you have your brand voice and tone, which we were talking about earlier. So for the tequila company, it was bold, confident, friendly, honest, passionate, and unapologetic. As a queer owned, like women owned and immigrant owned brand, it was really important to like lean into those like unapologetic types of tones. And that's why you see that there. You can see primary colors here, and then there's like a secondary colors also. And the important part of having that here is, and it's kind of small here, but there's like a bunch of small text beneath each color. And those are all of the hues or like the codes depending on where you're applying the colors. So whether it's Pantone, which is like for print, CMYK, which is also for print, RGB, which is for like digital, and hex, which is often for web. All of those codes are there, so that way you're always using the exact same colors. Color usage is what I mentioned earlier about which colors are allowed to play together within your brand colors and which ones are not. And really what determines that is just accessibility. You just want to make sure that you're prioritizing contrast. For those who might not be aware, color blindness is pretty common, and there's different tiers of it. And so as you're looking at your brand colors, you're not just thinking of like, okay, like having high contrast, but also having distinct enough colors from each other that folks with color blindness can still read through that. So there's some tools online that I have linked towards the end that can kind of show you. They'll actually demonstrate if you plug in your colors, it'll show you where they land on the color blindness scales for folks. Then you'll have your like logo, your graphics, your brand fonts here, including the type hierarchy. So like your header treatments, your subheaders, your body headers, your body here, which is like the body copy, and then your footers, and then also like photography treatments. Let me adjust. So just that sort of show like what your images should typically look like. Are they high contrast images? Are they like, you know, super soft and dreamy? Are they like really playful? Are they really colorful? Like all of that. Ideally, there should be like a mood board showing what that is, and that's often helpful if helpful to show if you're like hiring a photographer, for example. You can say like, hey, this is our brand mood board for photography. Let's stay in this vibe. So now let's move into Canva. What is Canva? So I know like several of you are familiar with it already, so I'll just kind of breeze through this. But it's essentially a graphic design platform to create social media graphics, presentations, posters, documents, and other visual content. Canva keeps growing and in really like amazing ways. It's becoming even more accessible. They're including more features over time. They actually just bought Affinity, which is like a really strong like design platform. So they're only going to get bigger and better and better. So some key tools of Canva is that it has pre-built sizing templates for various social and print needs. So you don't have to look up those sizes. Most of them are in Canva, which makes it so much easier for a lot of folks. It also has a pre-built brand kit. This is for the paid version. And the helpful part about a brand kit, which I'll dive into in a second, is that it lets you plug in all of your colors, all of your fonts, all of that stuff, so you don't have to add it in manually every time. You can invite others to edit and collaborate with you, which is really helpful if you do have like a designer or a social media person working with you. And then similarly, you can also create multiple versions and sizes of a single design using their magic resize tool, which is pretty handy and nifty for folks. Because in other, like in Adobe, for example, there is no magic resize, it's just you resize, which can take a while. So to show you Canva's brand kit, what you can do is you can add your logos, your colors, your fonts, your icons, your imagery, graphics, and your internal guidelines all in one place. It's easy to access from the editing window, which you can see pictured left. And you can also create custom templates for future use, which makes it easier for you to populate and deliver new content so you don't have to redesign the same thing several times over. So I actually want to show you really quickly. This is my Canva window. I'm logged into the CLA account. And just to kind of show you, this is their brand kits. So you can kind of like pop into here. So let's do the Eat one because this one has a little bit less. So it's like you can see here, their logos are added. These are all of their official brand colors. Their fonts are actually not added in here, but let's go back to one where there's fonts. Go back over here. Okay, so this is like for CLA, so you can see the CLA colors, a bunch of their other project season accelerator colors, so you will recognize these because you've seen these colors. This is where you can see their fonts below. The fonts have been added, their heading, their subheading, their body. And so what's really nice is that when you come back, oops, to home, if I were to just create a brand new design, let's just say it's like, I want to make a Instagram square post. And then I just want, let's just go from the beginning. So what I can do now is if I click here and just click colors, your brand kit will show up right here. So let's do a quick season accelerator. So we'll just do Sprite. Let's do this cream color. We drop in some quick text here. Now the season accelerator text is actually a little bit different. So we can do, I think it's, what is it called? I forgot off the top of my head. It would be, oh my
You
goodness.
espaces, yeah, pero
Perfect. So what's really nice is that it'll load all of this into here. So then you can start playing with your like type sizes and stuff. And you're always on brand. So let's do our season accelerator green. And now things start to look familiar for you. Does Canva come with all those fonts or you load them in? Depending on what your font is, Canva does have partnerships with a lot of like major type industries or like type foundries. So if your font is from those foundries, then it will be in there. But if it doesn't, then you'll have to upload it. And it's really easy to upload. I can even just show you how to do that right now. So if you go to your brand again, let's go to this one here. So what you do is if you go to the font section, you click add new and then upload a font. And then as you can see, there's quite a bit uploaded in here, but you can click add new and then upload whatever your fonts are and then add them to the specific styles that they're a part of. But you can also search to see if they have it already. So if we go back over here to my brand new fake post, you can also just like search, here we go. You can also search for, so like, let's say, what's a good font to search for? Satoshi. They don't have Satoshi. Okay, let's pick another one. Manrope. They do have that one. Great. So like you could just switch it out there. So feel free to check first and then you can upload them. Again, you can only upload them if you have the paid version. So that's the catch. But in going into typography guidelines, I do see the other question, Jody. I'll get back to that one during our check-in. Thank you. So to go into typography guidelines, if you like the way that I like to like always explain this one is just like walk outside, look at any poster, go to the grocery store, read the signage. That's the best example of typography guidelines you're going to see. Because these are folks who have thought about it a lot. And so typically what you have is what we call an H1 or a header one. So this is your big one. This one can be stylized, have character, it can be kind of funky. So as you can see, I chose a super funky looking one. And the reason it can be stylized to this degree is because it's going to be huge. So it's going to be easier for folks to read regardless of the stylization that you have present. The smaller you go, the more legible it has to be. Otherwise, you start impacting accessibility. So for your subheaders, your H2, your H3, like header 2, header 3, these can be still slightly stylized. So this one has like a bold treatment, but it has to be more legible because at this point now you're communicating a bit more detail. Your body text has to prioritize legibility at this point because this is going to be read at various sizes across digital and print platforms. So you can kind of see what that looks like. And then your credits or your footer, this is like for anything that we call like small text or H4. So this is like your footers, your captions, your credits, small copy, your legal copy, things that you have to have at the very bottom or on the sides or wherever you place it from a design standpoint. And so at this point, when they're this small, you want to prioritize, like typically what you see folks do is like all caps text, and that's because it's easier to read at a small size. Sometimes they'll space out the spacing between the text, that's called kerning, just to kind of create a little bit more space there. But yeah, typically you want to follow the structure to make sure that you're successful in communicating your design. Similarly, from color guidelines, color contrast, as I mentioned before, is super critical. You want to make sure folks can read it. And so there's a really great tool online. It's Adobe Color, where you can drop in your two colors that you're thinking of pairing together, and it'll show you what it looks like and whether or not it passes the accessibility checker for small text, large text, and then for graphic design components. and it'll show you the contrast ratio up here. So yeah, typically what I like to recommend is stick to about 3 colors per design if possible, not including illustrations. I know that illustrations tend to have multiple colors, but for the core, like background color, text color, button color type of vibe, try to keep it to 3 or less. Less is more, but also because if you have more than 3 colors plus illustrations plus all of these other things going on, it can actually cause eye exhaustion and mental confusion for your audience. Like, I want you to think about, have you ever looked at a social media post or a flyer where there was just like a lot going on, and like you had maybe subconsciously or consciously this moment of like, I'm not even going to read that. Like, I'm moving on. That is real. You don't want to create that, especially you being the caretaker of your brand. Less is more. We want to communicate effectively. So what I like to do when I'm designing for social or just for like a digital use, like newsletters or whatever, is I download the file onto my phone once I'm done, and I look at it on my phone. And sometimes I'll even send it to my friends. If your friends can't read it, if you can't read it, if it starts to just look funky on your phone, then I go back into the design and I change the impacted element. So whether that's the color, the type size, the placement, etc. So that's always a great test, especially since we live in a mobile first world for the most part, at least here in the United States and in Western countries. um, you want to make sure that it's legible on the phone. So I have a couple more and then we'll have a break to check in because I know I've been talking. So photography and illustration guidelines. So the way that I like to talk about this is just like balance is key. You don't want to overwhelm the design, and just like create space for each element to visually breathe. Like negative space. So it's kind of like, the space around this like arch up here, the space below the text is what we would call negative space. You might also hear it be called white space. It's essentially the same thing. Um, that's really important. And again, this goes back to the eye exhaustion thing where it's like your eyeball needs room to just kind of like take a break before reading the next input, whether that's the text input or the photography input or the illustration input. You need space to move. And if there's too much going on, then your eye's not going to know where to go. It's not going to know the hierarchy. And then that's when we run into the problem we were just talking about. So in the United States, and in like most Western countries, we typically read from right to left, top to bottom, and in that order. So when you're designing something, you want to place your content strategically in these locations to create not only visual interest, but also content hierarchy. So that's why you see, like, for example, in the real estate one here, at the very top left, we have what looks like the company name, which could also be your logo. Then we have the main title. So again, we're going from top to bottom. Um, sorry, we don't read from right to left. We read from left to right. That's a typo on my end. But then we have like the name, then the image, and then we go into the details, and then we have this like nice negative space because at that point we've achieved what we're looking to do. So again, like less is more. Focus your content on the call to action for your audience, and save the details for the caption is what I like to say. So in terms of inspiration, if you're developing your brand or maybe you're working with a designer and you're just like, okay, I need to like pull some ideas together. I like to go to Pinterest. It's tried and true. It has not failed me yet. And honestly, it's a huge like website with design and visual inspiration. So part of my process whenever I'm working on a new project is I actually go into Pinterest and I just start making mood boards. I start to gather ideas and pull inspiration that I want to reference later or just think about later as I'm going through the design process. So Canva also has like a mood board type of thing going on. They have a bunch of templates, and you can like search through them and just kind of look at them for inspiration and or use them for your design projects. The one thing that I always want to call out though, when you're looking at Canva templates is make sure that if you pick one to actually apply your brand guidelines, including the fonts, the colors, the illustrations, how you lay out your content to it so that your communications are consistent. A lot of times what folks do with Canva templates is like they'll just pop it in, switch out the text, switch out a color, and they're like, great. but that looks like the template. You want to look like you. So always make sure to just like go that extra effort, customize it, really dive into it to make it your own. And the way that I treat Canva templates, it's kind of like a floor plan where it's like, oh, does it have the structure that's typically like what I'm looking for? Once it has that, then I go in and just kind of revamp the rest. So hopefully that helps. Um, some design do's and don'ts that I like to share. In terms of your brand elements, use your branded elements at all times. Don't introduce new elements unless you're integrating it into your brand identity. Try to only use the maximum of 3 brand colors at a time, again, just for simplicity. Negative space is okay. Try to group your like-minded elements together and use and really like lean into that visual hierarchy. Um, and like another thing, this is more so for like justice-based work, but I like to just like include it everywhere, is you want to show people in their power. There's a lot, I'm sure we've all seen that one nonprofit website where we're just like, oh my God, no, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're showing people who are comfortable in their power, owning their power, like in positions of their own power. So that way we can celebrate actual like equity and demonstrate that versus any other like visual trope, which is not okay. So some other things here is to just make sure it's legible. Again, download it onto your phone if you need to. Um, yes, you will have access to the presentation. The question was from Lola. And then to create contrast with size, weight, color, and style. So some things to not do. And again, this isn't like a hard and fast rule, like I won't come for you. This is just my personal recommendations. But try not to use 4 more colors. Do not change or stylize your logo. Once you have your logo, let it be. Ideally, when you make your logo, you'll have a couple different versions, like a white version, a black version, maybe like some colored versions or whatever. And that's just for the different backgrounds that you'd be putting them on. But don't like, throw a rainbow onto your logo or add glitter effects or whatever, unless that's a part of your brand. You want to be consistent the whole way through. Similarly, for most design needs, you shouldn't have more than 4 font sizes because again, you're stacking your text into a hierarchy system. So like typically header, subheader, body copy, sometimes a call to action like click here to register, sign up to volunteer, click here to purchase, whatever. And then like your footer text. And then similarly, and this happens a lot actually, don't squeeze a lot of text, aka copy, into your design. Social media actually hates it and it'll dock you. It'll remove you and like push you further down the algorithm. So that's not what we want. We want to make sure our audiences see our posts. So really try to focus on your design being visual forward versus text forward. The text can always go into the caption. It can always go into your website. It can always go into the thing that you're driving them to, and really focus the design on the more visual elements. The algorithm will boost you and then you'll get more views and then so on and so forth. So last one here and then we'll go into questions. So typically my design process looks something like this. Whenever I start a project, including branding, including website, flyers, menus, whatever, I always go back to what is the goal of the thing that I'm trying to communicate. That is important because remember, all we're doing is communicating. That's the art of it, right? So what is the number one message that I'm trying to communicate? And what is the action that I want the viewer, the audience to take? Based off of that, I use that to inform my process for the design. Then I start collecting the copy, aka the writing, and the content, so like the photography, the graphics, what have you. I keep it simple, save the longer the longer copy for the description. Then I go into the mood boarding, like thinking about like, okay, what's the look and feel? Like if we're a brand, but we're doing a partnership and we need to incorporate the other, partner's brand, or let's say uh, I don't know, I'm selling sauces and I'm doing my first pop-up at the farmer's market. and I want more of like a farmer's market feel, but I still want to keep my brand. What elements am I bringing in? Maybe it's a farmer's market photo, maybe it's their logo, etc. So I start looking at just like inspiration. And then based off of that, I go in and start building the design that I need. And so if you're working in Canva, you could either, pick a Canva template, you could have your own branded template at this point that you could just pick from, or you could just create a brand new design. And once you're done, you create and share it for others to engage with and hopefully do the thing that you want them to do in the message. So yeah, I have been speaking for quite a couple minutes. So quick check-in, questions, reflections, confusion. Would love to hear what you all think. I'm happy to go back to a couple of slides. After this, we'll go into Canva design. Dolores, raise your hand. Yes.
Hello. Earlier you mentioned something about word marks. I have never heard of that. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, definitely. So Wordmark is your logo that doesn't have any of the graphics around it. So let me pull up, I don't have an example in this slide actually, but I can pull up a file real quick. And the reason those are important, typically why you have to file those as a part of your trademark application is because in certain products, if you're selling products, you might be required to integrate your word mark into the design. And so this is like depending, I'm not a lawyer, um, but I have come across this before. So I always recommend for folks, if you're working with a designer, to create a word mark. So let me pull up the Orgullo one. Okay, great. So I'll reshare my screen. So this is the Orgullo brand guide. And then their word mark is this one here. And so this one does have like a little bit of like a sunburst going on, but otherwise it's like your text, this part here. And so this would be like their primary logo. So this is like what people would see everywhere. This is like what would be like legally required, sometimes with or without this like sun mark here. And then I made them like a bunch of icons just so they could have some stuff to play with. But typically those are like the primary, like your primary logo, like your specialty, like secondary logos, your word mark, and then your icons. Does that help answer the question, or did I make it more confusing?
No, no, no. That was perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions? Jody, yes.
I know that I'm a little different than everyone else in the fact that I know how to use Illustrator, but would you suggest using like I should teach myself Canva over using Illustrator, or just go with like what I know and what I'm, most forward thinking with? Because I know that everybody's using Canva now, which is hard for someone who went to graphic design school and all the things. It's like, oh wow, okay. But I don't know if I'm gonna be behind the ball if I don't get on it with Canva with everyone.
Yeah, so Illustrator is definitely a stronger and more robust tool. And so if that's what you know how to use, I would say stay there. The only time for someone with that type of experience moving into Canva would be useful is simply if you're just trying to create templates that you have like a social media person or someone else external to you that it's easier for them to populate. Like for example, in my work with Food Access LA, I build most of the designs in Adobe. So like it's either Illustrator, InDesign, etc. Unless it's a template that they need to have for their staff to like quickly switch out copy and push it out. So that's when I'll build in Canva. Canva is better, I think, for like presentation. So like, a pitch deck or something like that. But if you're stronger in Adobe Suite, I would say stay there and only move to Canva for like shareable templates, essentially.
I feel like I'm an old dog trying to learn new tricks. And like you said, there's 1,000 things to learn every day, whether it's like video and Instagram and Pinterest and so on and so forth. It's like I'm trying to navigate where to put my best effort forward to utilize my strengths.
Yeah, yeah.
Lot.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, as for me, someone working in design, the current thing that I'm navigating is like the AIification of everything. But again, where I tell folks is like especially small businesses is like stick to what is best, like of best use and gives you the best like return on effort for you. And so, and then kind of adapt based on what those needs are. So for certain folks who don't have a design background, like Canva is a really great place to just kind of like get started and like possibly even stay because it'll cover most of your needs. As you grow as a business, eventually you will actually move out of Canva for like more intense like graphic design needs, just because Adobe has again a more robust tool. Um, but for starting out, Canva is a great way to go. And it's also great for shareable templates. Anything beyond that, like Adobe Suite really starts to shine. But like for you in particular, I think like stay with what you know, go to Canva once you hire someone, like a social media person. But other than that, like unless a social media person knows Adobe, then you're fine, you know? But yeah, that's how I tend to approach it.
And what's your experience? You were just touching on AI. Are you feel like I shudder at the thought, obviously, as an artist. What's going on in that world and what are you seeing happening? And would it benefit all of us as a whole?
Yeah, I think so. Canva actually has an AI tool that it's developing, and it's something that you can experiment with as you log in. I think that it's a much bigger conversation, but I think in terms of this space, there are some benefits where it can help you iterate an idea faster. So for example, if you're like, okay, I need a menu design. I've never designed a menu. I'm terrified. I don't even know what's a good menu. And then like panic mode happens, which is often. Um, you can log into their like AI tool. Here, I can just show you. You can log into their AI tool and just workshop a couple ideas on what a menu could look like for you. I forget how you do it. It's been a while.
Is it a part of the free section?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm in the CLA one, which is here it goes, called Magic Studio. It might be free, it might not be. I can look into that. Um, but they have like this like magic design for presentations, magic for video. And so you can experiment with that. And if you choose to do so, what I would like to just like offer is it's a robot using algorithms. It's not going to be perfect. If anything, what I would say is just treat it as like a sketching tool just to kind of get a sense of a direction and then go in and make it your own. Especially because AI is so new, we're not entirely sure how legislation is going to change around it in terms of copywriting and whatnot. So you don't want to use the thing the robot gave you because you might technically not own it. So always just go in, customize it, make it your own if you choose to use it at all. So yeah.
Does it create a interactive template or does it create something that you cannot change? Does
It
that
does
make
make an interactive template. We can even try it right now. Let's see. So I think it's prompting me to do it here. So let's see. Let's do menu design for anyone want to name a type of restaurant or food business or drink business?
cookies?
Lola.
Wait, I'm sorry. You both spoke at the same time. Anyone?
Yuri.
I was gonna say cookies just because, I'm throwing it in there.
All right, let's do cookies.
It'll
Cookie.
help me and Lola and Francois.
All right, so it seems like that's what it, no, these are real ones. Maybe it didn't do it. How do we get this to work? Me, magic, try it now. Yeah, I obviously haven't used this. Menu design for cookie business, try again. I don't know, maybe this is what the machine made. I'm not sure. But there's a way to, I guess, to create a design. No. All right, failed demonstration. I know there's a way to do it in here. I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't use that feature. Maybe let's try it for presentations and see what happens. Here we go. Okay, pitch deck for cookie business. Let's see what the robot creates. So it's generating up here. So we click see all. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I could have been more specific here. We have like some architecture looking thing, but replace current page. I don't know, it's fun. Sweet delights. So it's like you can use this as like a idea generator. If we go back here, we can say for cookie business that is playful. Let's see what we get. This is where like prompt writing starts to become a skill set. Obviously that's not my forte. This is why I do visual stuff. But look, now we get something kind of like fun, apply all 7 pages. So we get, I don't know, something kind of like this. And then you can use that to kind of like start generating ideas. Again, like my rule of thumb with Canva is like, once you get something kind of like this, make it your own, like implement your brand, lean into that versus just using what the template gave you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions before we move into design?
Jesse, I saw that Dolores, one of our Lolas had her hand raised. I don't know if her question was answered or she'll still have a questions.
Yeah,
Question.
No, it was answered. Sorry, I thought
Okay,
I put
cool.
my hand down. Thank you.
You did. I just wanted to make sure.
thank you, Maybelline. Any other questions? Again, you'll have a copy of the presentation. All right, let's move into, so I thought it'd be cool to do both, but we're running a little bit closer on time, so we could just pick. Maybe we could pick by popular vote, or you could just choose, whichever one. But one idea was to do an event or pop-up flyer, and the other idea was to do a menu. I figured why not just have you design something that would be useful for you all to have later. You can come back to, just give you a tool. So yeah, the idea is to go ahead and, pick your format. So if you're doing the pop-up flyer or the event flyer, a post or IG stories format, whichever one you use most in your communications. And then to include the event name or header, you could make it up if you don't have one already. A brief event description. And if you don't have that, you can just kind of drop in what we call like placeholder text, also known as lorem ipsum. So I'm gonna actually just drop in this website. This is my favorite website ever. So you can just like copy and paste some in there and just use it to like placeholder for space. Then include date and time location. Again, you can make this up, RSVP tickets or other call to action, like is it a purchase now, sign up now, call us, hire us, etc. And then for visuals to include your logo, if you have one. If you don't have one, you can just add like the name of your business. And then 2 to 4 graphic elements, so a shape, pattern, texture, or illustration, etc. If this feels like too intimidating and you're just like, well, I don't even have half of this, you can also, just make your menu. So the format would be an 8.5 by 11 size, just like normal sheet size paper. Menu as the header, a couple menu items, description and price. You could even use your own menu items if you have them already. And then bonus, if you want to add in dietary restrictions or allergens, that's always great. Folks love to know. I'm a vegan, so I'm always looking for that. And then visuals to include your logo if you have one. So I welcome folks to choose whichever one you want to design. Feel free to pop into Canva as you're designing. Feel free to ask questions also. And then we can regroup in, let's say, like we have until what, 12:30, I believe. We can regroup in about 12 minutes just to see how folks' designs are coming along and what questions are coming up. The point of this exercise is more so to help like be kind of like a teacher on the sidelines, like helping you answer some of those questions versus having something perfect. So yeah, do folks know which one they want to design? And I can stay on this slide or I can hop back and forth between the two. Uh, desktop or whichever you have access to is fine. Okay, someone said menu. Okay, I can go ahead and just leave it on the menu slide for now. And then if anyone's doing the event flyer, just let me know and I can click back over whenever you need to see that information again. But yeah, feel free to just pop into Canva and just start working through some of the designs here. So again, think about like what do you want to have on your menu that makes it maybe unique to you, true to your tone and your voice, true to your brand colors. If you don't have brand colors, maybe pick a couple that you think could be your brand colors or like something similar to the look and feel of the vibe that you're going for. Um, your typography, all of that good stuff. And again, doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just here to answer questions and concerns and whatnot. So I'll put on some music, some background music as we're designing. And then what we'll do is we'll check back in about 12 minutes. So let's see, what do we want as background music? Mhm. All right, let's do some Cuban music. worries. Yeah, just feel free to start kind of like putting in your finishing touches. We'll go ahead and start with Lola's because Lola's dropped theirs into the chat. And once you have your links, feel free to drop yours in and we'll just go in order of appearance. So let me go ahead and open a new tab here. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look here. Actually, let's do this because I want to see it in a different format. Okay, perfect. That's better. And then I can do that. Awesome. Okay. So like again, feel free to start dropping them into the chat. So Lola's question was like, trying to make it more approachable. Is it too busy? Any feedback for creating a simple menu? And so the reason I like the menu exercise is because, and like Lola said it in their question, like it's about simplicity. Um, you know, when you're looking at a menu, you just want to know what is it? How much is it? Can I eat it? And then, yes, I would like to have it. And that's also a place where you can really drive attention for the product, right? You know, where you can show maybe how delicious it is with like a photography or like with a photograph or an illustration, or you could really exemplify some of your brand elements, things like that. So for this one here, just from looking at the menu off the bat, I can tell that there's an element of like fun, like there's an element of like, okay, there's like a handcrafted type of approach going on here. Whether or not that's true to the brand, I'm not sure. I'm just kind of speaking to what I'm seeing here. But this is what's starting to show up for me. And then in the second menu here, you can see that there's a couple more options, including what the flavors are, the toppings, the dough, all of that stuff. And so some things that I would just start to say off the bat by looking at this is from an illustration standpoint, there's a couple of different illustrative styles that we're seeing. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and make a copy if you don't mind, Lola. And what I would do is I would choose a style that I want to stick with. So, awesome. Okay. So for example, I'll just go ahead and pick, and then you can, you know, decide later. But based off of the font that you have here, I'm just gonna kind of like zoom in here. So there's like a nice like texture around it. And that looks fun. That looks like an important element that might even be your logo. And so what I would recommend doing is finding an illustrative style that speaks to that. Again, we want to be consistent and show that across the board. So we have this nice texture here. The closest one is maybe this one over here or this one. I think these two are like a good battle of the bands, if we remember that. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'd actually just remove these ones here. I'm gonna choose this one because this one's really cute. And then what you can start to do now is find other illustrative elements that have this style. So this is more of like a kind of like a texturized, like almost like a painted type of look, drawn on type of vibe. And then you can start finding other styles that have that. So if we go to our elements here and go to graphics, sometimes they'll do like recommendations. This is from like an old project, so they don't have that. But you can also type in something. So we could do like watercolor shapes. And then we can get something kind of like this is not too bad. But I like this round shape. Can we change the color though? No. So this is where you start to like really go in here and see other elements. Some of them, they do let you change the colors of them. This one, not so much, but this is close enough in the palette that I'll just kind of drop it in. And so what I would start to look at now is like framing, right? So if we want to do this up here, then we could just bring this back. You know, we have this like counter chocolate chip border going on. And what this does is it just focuses the eye. So now we're going straight to the center, which is the important part. In terms of this here, you definitely have like type hierarchy happening, which is really great. And I would just kind of like simplify it a little bit more. So like this is kind of close in size. So what I would do is just bring this down just a little bit. So this is 19 points. You could probably even go down to like 16 here. And so what it does is it allows folks to like see a visual difference. It's not huge, as you can tell, but it's enough that like you're able to focus just a little bit better. If the italics is something that's important and it's a part of your typography guidelines, I would leave it. If it's not though, because you can also kind of see it here, then we can actually do something more like this. And then this is the logo. That's right. Okay. So do you know what font that will? We don't know. Okay. So another thing that I'll just kind of like wing it here, but another thing that you could do is, I mean, this isn't exactly what I would do, but like kind of offer things like this, where you're showing, this is another, we could do 16 there. So you want to have consistency, like these are all, the small text is now all 16. This can be bold. And then now you have a little bit more of like a visual structure that folks are dropping into. And then this little fun duo over here can now like pop out from like the bottom and be like a little vibe. So this is kind of like a quick pass, but just kind of showing like how these pieces start together. And like you still have the same content, you're still focusing in the same way, but now you have a little bit more of like a clearer structure. This is also more particular to my design style, right? Someone else might add maybe like another element over here, or like maybe make this the background or whatever. So there's ways that you can like play with it, but that's kind of how I would approach it from like a process standpoint. And let's see, let's open up. The next one that we have here is Dolores. So I'm gonna go ahead and click here. Would you be able to create a publicly shareable link, Dolores? So the way to do that is if you go
Yes,
to,
Abby. Mhm.
oh, sorry. Yeah,
Sorry, let me try. But you could go to a next one if somebody else is ready.
sure. Does anyone else have, feel free to just drop the link into the chat. Anyone who wants to show and tell. If you're nervous, no worries. This is a safe space. Promise no judgment. Design is a process. All right, we have Corin. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Is it Corin? Corinne?
It's Corinne.
Corinne, okay, awesome, thank you.
Just a quick start to one.
Yeah. Again, this is a safe space, no judging. So before I begin with anything, I would love to know what are the questions that you have and how can I best support you?
The Puff and Crunch goodies, that's our logo. We also on our logo sticker we have candy behind it, but I have pulled the Puff and Crunch goodies words out. That was our original logo. I like the purple and the red. We have kind of everything centered around that, but I would like a brighter accent color kind of thing, maybe when I'm creating designs, and like just kind of playing with this template. The first thing that I tried to change on the menu was the rainbow puffs. So I was able to add in a picture of our rainbow puffs, and I somehow got that red circle to be smaller, but I don't know how I did it.
Yeah, so it looks like it's like this shape back here. Is that the red
Yes.
circle? Okay, cool. So yeah, it seems like from the design, just to kind of do like a quicker overview, like the design that you have here is like, these are not design terms. This is just like how my brain understands stuff. Like I would call it like bubbly, like a little bit more fun, like a little bit like there's like this kind of like swooshy energy going on. Don't
Yes.
quote me on this, but
Yes.
that's how my brain is like, okay, vibe. And so I think what's something that could happen here that's kind of fun is like you can retain an element like this, but match it a little bit closer to like the drop shadows that you have happening over here. And that's just a matter of like, searching, right? Like you could search for like, I don't know, under graphics, you just do like bubbly circle or something. That's too many bubbles. Maybe like this is where you just start to like organic circle. There's no X. Something more like this shape might be a little bit closer to home for you.
Okay.
Um, that might be too much though. But anyways, like what I would do is I would just kind of like play around, try to find a shape that's a little bit closer to the aesthetic that you have. I'm sure there's a better keyword that I'm just not thinking of. But once you find something like that, then you can kind of use that as a search term. Like this is probably closer actually. And then we could pick, your brand red here. And then if you don't mind, I would just take this one out. And then you could use that as like a background element to frame here. Now, something that I like to recommend when you're showcasing like food products is try not to detract too much from the image. The food is the most important part, not the graphics. And so, for example, like this up here, I'm gonna actually just make a duplicate so we can save the original. Like what I would do is actually use these elements and just make them bigger and have those just be like a nice like background touch without having to take up like too much, space. Same thing down here, like you can kind of play around with that. You could even make this circle yellow, which is a more, I don't remember which one's the yellow that you're using, but we'll pick one. But now you can start to do something like this. And then that way, the only call out text that you have is your logo and then the menu title. So there's ways that you can kind of like soften that and then kind of have all these other elements still like play together pretty nicely. But yeah, I like this is like a fun approach and template. I would say for your logo size to have like a higher resolution, I imagine you just dropped in whatever you could find. But just make sure that you're using a higher resolution item. And then same thing
How
here.
do I do that?
Um,
I am computer and design illiterate. I've been, just kind of playing with different things. How does one carry that over? I got that from an email from the graphic artist who did our logo.
Got it. Okay. I would double check the files that they gave you. And depending on the designer, everyone does this a little bit differently. But I would look at the files. Ideally, the file types that you should have are, I'm gonna drop them into the chat. So you should have an EPS, SVG, and PNG file. EPS is for print. SVG can be it's mostly print, but sometimes web. It's like for animations and stuff. And then PNG has a transparency, which allows you to do like stuff like this.
Okay.
For PNG, what you need are a high resolution and low resolution. High resolution is for print. That has the most information possible. Low resolutions for web because you don't need that much information. This looks like it might be a low resolution file. So just make sure that they either gave it to you or just go back and ask for it and they can export it. A high resolution version. So that way you always have the best quality possible, especially when you're printing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
One more question. With that red and purple, what color would you suggest as like, a pop? Because they are kind of muted colors. We do freeze dried candy, so it's fun, it's colorful, it's children based to a degree. Is like a bright yellow a good accent color? Is that too much?
Yeah, I think this is where you can really do a deeper dive into branding. Obviously, with anyone that you do branding with, there will be a longer conversation around this. Some early thoughts or like some questions that I would use to approach that would be like, what are the colors that you typically see in the candies or or in the goodies that you're creating. Because again, you always want to reference the product or the service. And then lean into that as like a reference point. So for example, the reason I would shy away from the yellow personally is because you're based in LA and those are Lakers colors, purple and yellow. And it's just something to be aware of. Even if you're not doing sports, you just want to be like, okay, most people around here are going to recognize a purple yellow combo. And so another option, like in just thinking candy, like a teal could be kind of nice. You tend to see teals in candies. This is like a super fast pass. Obviously, this isn't like purple, like really great color theory or anything. But teal also plays really nicely with like a purple and red. So you could do something like that. But yeah, there's ways that you could have a deeper approach to it. I would just recommend starting with like, what is the product? What often shows up? What's like association to the product? And go there. Like with the, yeah. I do know that we're at time. If folks want to stay on, I'm happy to chat through some of the other designs. But if not, what I do want to show is just some of the closing slides. I'm so sorry we went over. I just got into it and totally lost track. But some things that I wanted to show you before we go. I love this meme so much. This is like day in the life for me because you're thinking about the design or the menu or whatever it is that you're making and you're like, wow, so cool, so excited, can't wait to do it. And then you start doing it and you're in tears because it's so frustrating. This is the design process. So whenever you're designing and you have a challenge, don't worry, drink some water, go walk outside, breathe in, breathe out. It's perfectly normal. We all go through it. It's part of the process in many ways, and it's okay. So don't worry about like getting hung up. You can always show it to friends. You can always show it to colleagues and peers, get feedback, and just keep working on it. Some resources, again, you'll have this presentation. These are all links, but there's getting started with Canva, design tips. Canva does have a social media course if you want to take that, as well as the color accessibility checker. And then I've also linked a couple sites for stock photography if you don't already have your own images. There's Canva stock photos, Unsplash, Pexels, and Burst by Shopify. There's many other stock photo sites. These are the ones where you can find free images, which I know makes it a little bit easier for folks because buying licensing can be expensive sometimes. But yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this session. Thank you for offering your questions, your insights, and all of that. There was a question towards the end about Shopify. So Jody, I'll answer that for you in a second. But everyone else, just thank you so much. Again, if anyone wants to stay on for other design questions, I'm happy to. But otherwise, I really appreciate your time. And yeah, hopefully this offered you something. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jessy. This was great. Any final questions for Jessy, or she's good to go? Aside of Jody's question.
Yeah.
I'll just make it really quick. I know I have to get back to work too. Shopify versus Squarespace. I chose Squarespace because visually it's more interesting for me and I could create the whole atmosphere. But what I understand as a consumer goods product person, Shopify makes more sense getting the product out there, and it's more collaborative with other platforms. What's your thought? Because I noticed that you do a lot of stuff on Squarespace also.
Yeah. So the way that I would like to weigh that out, Shopify was built for brick and mortars. It started off as a back-end platform for a brick and mortar, and that's why it's amazing at it. So e-commerce, like actual like brick and mortar shops, etc. It has all the back-end infrastructure that you need, or that you could possibly need to do that, to like run a store. From a design standpoint, it's a little bit more challenging because Shopify literally has its own coding language. It's called Liquid. And so what happens a lot to folks in Shopify is that from a design standpoint, you either have to hire a designer or you get locked into the template that you choose beyond the customizations that you're able to figure out. If you do hire a designer and a developer, then you can go way further. You just need to be able to invest into that. And so what I would recommend for folks who are weighing that out is go towards Shopify if you're looking to scale, especially within the next like 1 to 3 years. If you're not trying to scale that quickly, like maybe you just have a couple products, you're like slowly testing the waters, you're looking to scale within like a 3 to 5 year window, you could start with Squarespace just because it's an easier build and then move over to Shopify once you're ready. Shopify also has a higher membership price point. So that's why I like to like tell folks like that's something you grow into versus something that you start with. But it's definitely product focused, as you were saying. It's definitely built for that type of market. If you're not a product heavy, like maybe you're more of like a restaurant, pop-up kitchen, that type of vibe, Squarespace is a lot more adaptable for you. It still integrates with a lot of features. And so that could serve you and carry you quite a way. So that's kind of how I like to weigh it out. Yeah.
Is there an easy conversion from Squarespace? Because that's the wall I keep hitting, is the conversion from Squarespace to Shopify, and just giving up on the fact that I want it to look a certain way, but I don't want to spend $10,000 on having someone code it. But I'd like it to be cohesive with where I'm at already and created on Squarespace. Is there an easy convergence?
Not really without hiring a designer. In terms of migrating your products, yeah, because you just export them. But from a design standpoint, it would require investment at some point. And so what Shopify has is there's a lot of templates out there that you can use and just try to find something that's closest. There's also independent designers that sell templates. So you can like search online and find those that are by like independent designers or studios or what have you. And that might bring you a little bit closer to home, but there isn't a one-to-one without, well, there isn't a one-to-one without a developer.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks again for staying on. Maybelline, thank you also because I know you're staying on. But yeah, if you have any questions, y'all are also more than welcome to reach out to me. My website is there in the chat, so I'm happy to answer questions in the future. I'm just here like, you know, to offer guidance and support for you all as you go on your food adventures. And I can't wait to try all your products and services because I love to eat. I'm a Taurus moon, so eating is like my passion.
Welcome to the team.
Yeah. But
Thank you
all
so much,
much.
Jessy. Thank you everyone for staying a little longer. I'll just send everyone the upcoming update via email so we don't take any more time of your day. Speak my language, Jessy, say Jody. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.